Hey everyone, this is Melissa Tondi. I'm very excited to be participating in this year's conference, and I'm going to talk a little bit about being a lazy tester and some of my musings. So, I've got 2 points to share with you for this particular video content. And I want to talk a little bit about the perception of being lazy. Some of those are you're not capable of completing tasks. Maybe you're not creative, or maybe that's a misperception when people think about laziness. Maybe you have no passion, or that's another misperception of being lazy. You take too long or are too slow starting new things. Sometimes being lazy equals the inability to quote unquote work hard. And all of those misperceptions kind of combined really have kind of a bad perception of what being lazy is and has a bit of a negative connotation. So I'd like to repurpose the term being lazy from perhaps a negative connotation to a more positive one and see how you can apply that to your own testing on the day to day. So I'll talk a little bit about my story. I've always considered myself a pretty lazy person. I like to perfectly time my morning so that the moment I wake up, I have the least amount of time between me getting up until my next possible task, whether it's going to work or whether it's getting ready to go to my home office, doing some activity. And it's because it helps me and my mind to be hyper efficient. And in some cases, allows me a little bit more time to sleep in. In my particular situation, I actually equate being lazy to being efficient. And if you've ever heard me speak before, efficiency is one of those tenets that I put a lot of my career on and riding that. I think that there's always ways for us to think about being efficient. And hopefully that does not turn into the misperception of being lazy. Because really, being efficient leads to optimization. And everyone should really seek to be optimized in whatever tasks they're doing, but really focusing on testing. Thinking about things, even if it's just for a few seconds before you actually act, grounds you so that you can spend a lot more time on the most important tasks at hand. And it clears your head, honestly, to avoid what we call analysis paralysis, so you can fully commit to your next action. So I love this quote because being lazy without capitalizing on the time saved is still lazy. But when you fill that time with more valuable and effective tasks, it actually is optimization. So we should always strive to be optimized, which is that combination of having that lazy/efficient mindset, but also understanding that there will be some trade offs with time found when you start removing inefficiencies from your day to day. So let's talk about 2 points where being lazy might apply to you. So let's talk about testing in the present state, right? QA owns most, if not all, testing. That is a very common practice now in most shops, where if you have a formal quality assurance, quality engineering, or testing team, that the now perception is that QA owns all of that testing. And if schedules don't cooperate, which we know they don't, we have limited options, because by the time things wind up coming to traditionally the testing team, we really have to be the ones that sort of jump in and save the schedule. We stay late, we work longer hours to keep the release or the sprint on track. And sometimes we recruit others by giving them a set of tests or instructions to follow, a bug bash, an all hands on deck, some sort of regression testing. We've all been through these, and these are all creative, very creative solutions on how to mitigate issues that may result in when schedules don't cooperate. But most of the time, we have very little or no insight into any other testing going on. We generally don't have a lot of insight into unit or integration tests unless we're plugged into those, or unless they're part of the CI build and gated. But a lot of times, and still quite frequently, when I ask the question of folks of whether or not they have insight or what they know of what the unit and integration guidelines are within their software engineering org counterparts, a lot of the time the answer is I don't know, or there are none. And we don't have insight into those. Other types of testing that may be happening are acceptance criteria acceptance testing by a traditional business analyst or product owner or product manager, and UAT. These are all tests that are likely happening, but perhaps not as formal as our traditional QA/quality engineering test. So we look at testing in the present state. How can we actually apply that to being the lazy tester's way? So in the lazy tester's way, testing is actually a shared responsibility within the team. And there's a lot of language and verbiage you can use to set that expectation up with the team. Quality engineers, and I'm calling out QE specifically here, because we are really shifting our role into being more of that guide consultant while also sharing in some of the responsibility of testing. But this really directly addresses the misnomer or misperception that the QA/QE team owns all of the testing that's happening, or the more formal testing that's happening. And when schedules don't cooperate, again, because we know they won't, we create options that are equitable. We incorporate our capacity and bandwidth in a very pragmatic way. And we really stick to that. We should know what kind of capacity and bandwidth we always have, and make sure that we're always balancing that with high priority tasks. We use risk-based testing approaches and guide the team to decide the next steps rather than it all falling on our shoulders, QE's shoulders or QA's shoulders to make that go, no go decision. We actually consider that a team agreement and a team responsibility, and we provide critical information to guide the team in making that ultimate decision of how we proceed when something injects itself that might negatively impact our ability to deliver high quality. And we gain insight into both explicit and implicit testing activities because we're asking what our counterparts are doing in order to validate and get a much better landscape view of not only the testing that we are traditionally responsible for, but all of the other testing, again, likely more informal and in some cases formal, but we're asking about that and we're discovering and actually using that information to better inform where we spend our time when we are interacting with the software. And we stay in our lane generally until we can be lazy with our teammates. And that is really the ultimate goal, because the shortest and most efficient path between 2 points is a straight line. So us staying in our lane really is the best and most optimized way to get and avoid enabling behavior that's not necessarily conducive to effective team dynamics. But we always quickly and proactively drive those conversations real time. We're actively and liberally sharing information that we're gathering, no matter what testing activities we're doing. So let's apply that same lazy testing to test automation. So our test present state, generally, we have a very big monolithic regression suite, or something that runs maybe off hours in the middle of the night, and a regression suite that may take 4, 6, 8 hours, maybe more, to run that. We run big multi-hour suites, like I said, off hours or overnight. And the results are usually vetted out only by the QA or the QE team. It doesn't necessarily isn't necessarily shared, or maybe not as viewed as valuable with the rest of the team. So it generally winds up appearing in some lone Slack channel or similar type of concentrated or siloed type of communication feedback. And it generally becomes a numbers game. A lot of cases, we're still being managed and measured by a certain percentage of test cases. And in this case, I'm using the term test case to denote a test that is generally executed by a human tester, quality engineer. But we still tend to be measured on a certain percentage of test cases automated. And that is supposed to be equal or equates to high quality, which, of course, for those of you who've been doing this a while, you know that that's not necessarily correct. The more tests that we have and the more automation we have does not necessarily equal high quality. So what do we do when we put the lazy tester's lens on that? Well, first of all, we provide the most valuable information as soon as possible. We use a tests as a service approach, and I have a couple of talks on this particular topic, but really the best way for us to organize our tests as a test as a service approach is to organize those tests the same way that your software engineers are organized. Perhaps those are concentrated into certain areas of code. Perhaps and they're centralized, meaning anyone on the team can run them. And we're starting to actually create these tests so that the person that has created that script or test themselves is not necessarily the only one that is running them. And the more automated in that standpoint, and the more that it's aligned to how the software engineers have organized their own work, the better equipped and more accepting they would be to start running those on their own, rather it always being the responsibility of the quality engineering team. So a stretch goal that I'd like to challenge you on these 2 points, and especially the automation one, is think about your regression testing strategy right now. Who does it now? Testing as a service actually allows all people on the team, specifically software engineers, to validate themselves for regressions. Again, so it doesn't always just land on the shoulders of quality engineering. And we really kind of wrap this under a tiered approach, or what I like to call multiple runs for multiple dones. So gone is this huge monolithic regression suite that takes hours and hours. We like to replace that with smaller, centralized, and much more efficient suites of tests that provide more concentrated and quicker feedback to the whole team. And all of that kind of consumes the name and the definition that I like to use on quality engineering. And we know when we have done quality engineering the right way, when we are influencing the building of the software before the software is built. So if you'd like more information, I encourage you to contact me directly. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this talk, and please enjoy the rest of TestFlix.